what kind of tools do you need? Well, they need to be sharp, they need to be well maintained, and they need to be decent quality. And quality is really defined by the steel in the blade. That's what you're paying for. Yeah, there's workmanship and all that good stuff. For a set of hand pruners, you can spend $12, you can spend $70. Which one do you buy? Well, it kind of depends on how much pruning you're going to do. For you as new tree stewards, if you don't have pruning tools, a hand cutter and a hand saw, we have them. And you can use ours when we come out into the field and do our field activity, which will be upcoming, and see what you think of them. And so before you go out and buy any, you might want to use some of ours and get a sense of how they feel in your hand and so on. But what you're paying for when you buy these kinds of tools is the quality of the steel in the blade. The more you spend, the better quality. And when you're doing your pruning, you want to make sure that you're using a tool that's the right size for the cut. As soon as you get to the point where you can no longer cut it with your hand cutter, you're probably going to be going to a saw. You can extend your reach with pole saws and pole cutters. Saws are more accurate than loppers because your eye is usually closer to the blade when you're doing a saw cut than with pruners, where your cut is out some distance away from you, the length of the lopper handle, plus your arm length. And the further your eye is away from the cut, the less accurate you're going to be. So you could run into some problems making your cuts on branch bark collars, but you have to do it. Not all your cuts are right in front of your nose. But most of what you can do with this tool and one of these. 90+% of the work you're going to do out there on trees, you can do with a hand cutter and a saw. And you can make your decision, and may already have, you may do this stuff and know what tools you like, whether you prefer a straight blade to a folder. Folders are convenient, but there's some limit on the length of the blade. You know, they sell 9-inch ones, but they don't have great blades. It's too long. So you're usually going to be looking at one that's maybe 7 inches long, one of these and one of these. And you're set for most of what you have to do, except for extending your reach. This is a 3-foot handle and a 1-foot saw blade. So that gives you 4 extra feet. These extendables will give you up to 12 feet. And when we go out pruning as tree stewards, we will have pole saws with us, and we'll have pole cutters. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's like the Cadillac version. You have 3-4-foot lengths, so you got up to a 12-foot handle, and at the top of it, you can put on a saw, and it has this little hook on it, and the hook is to allow you to grab a hold of the branch that you've cut and pull it back out through the canopy so it doesn't end up hung up in the tree. But there are occasions when a saw isn't going to do the job for you. And let me explain. Let's say if you can picture in your mind that first photo we looked at of a codominant lead, where we had the branch coming up and then it split in 3 directions. So if you decided you were going to leave this one and you were going to remove this one, and you took your pole saw and you stuck it up there at the top of the tree, and you pulled the saw to start cutting, what is going to happen is the whole top of the tree is going to move because it's too thin up there. It's too light. So the saw isn't going to do the job for you. You're going to need to have what's called a pole cutter. And this basically is just it's the blade end of a lopper or a hand cutter. And you hook that over the branch you want to cut. You've got a long rope here with a handle on the end of it. You pull it and it snips it off. So when we go out pruning, we're going to have some pole saws and some pole cutters because we know we're going to run into some codominant leads. Okay. I have to do my little rant against anvil pruners. What's an anvil pruner? What's a bypass pruner? So we use bypass pruners. This is a bypass pruner. You're looking at it blade on. You're looking at it from the front. And with a bypass pruner, the blade bypasses the lower portion of the mechanism, the jaw mechanism that's referred to as the hook. And what's important about that is that the portion that's over the hook here is going to be crushed when you close that jaw on it and make the cut. But you don't care about that because that's the discarded portion of the branch. This is where the branch bark collar is. you don't want to crush the branch bark collar. And with an anvil pruner, the blade comes down right in the center of the bottom part, which is called the anvil, and it crushes both sides. So when you use an anvil pruner, and you're doing a removal cut and you're right up against the branch bark collar, the collar would be over here, you're crushing it. And we're doing small branch cutting because we're doing small trees. You don't want to crush the branch bark collar on a small tree. So don't use anvil pruners. Take a look at your pruners, make sure what you have. Do you have an anvil or do you have a bypass? Keep the bypass. For the anvil pruner, put it up on your tool rack and leave it there. Don't use it for pruning. And even with your bypass pruners, you have to be thinking about where your blade is when you're making a cut. You want to have your blade on the inside when you're doing a removal cut so that you don't crush the branch bark collar. And you're going to find situations where you have to turn it upside down because you have to kind of get into a tight spot. Just be thinking about where your blade is. You want the blade on the inside, the branch bark collar side. Maintenance, periodically you're going to want to get out some type of lubricant and some steel wool and clean off your blade because it's going to accumulate crud. Sap from what you've been cutting, little pieces of sawdust and bark and so on. So occasionally you got to go at it to just physically clean it off. You need to be sharpening them regularly. I bring a sharpener with me. I have it in my pocket. I use this is a diamond sharpener. They're pretty good. They have two different grades of fineness. So if I've really gotten dull, I can use the rough side and then go back and use the finer side for it. Anyhow, there are all sorts of different sharpeners out there. This photo shows one of these kinds of sharpeners, a diamond sharpener in use. And you'll notice that they're pushing the tool against the blade, not with it. Okay, against the blade. That's how you do it. And there's a reason for that, which we don't have time to go into, but that's how you do it. What I'd recommend you do if you haven't had much practice with sharpening your tools, go to the website for this outfit. It's called Diamond Machine Technologies, DMT. And they have a good free video on there on how to sharpen. So whether you buy their tools or not, you'll learn how to sharpen if you don't already know. For bypass pruners, you only sharpen them on one side. You sharpen them at a 20-degree angle. This tool is at a 20-degree angle to the blade. So it shows you how to do all that. And it's not a big deal. You do it a couple times and you got it. And you carry your sharpener with you out in the field. If you're working for 2 or 3 hours at a pop, you'll probably want to sharpen at least once. It's easy to sharpen pruners. It's not easy to sharpen saws. It used to be easier because it used to be that you'd buy a pruning saw and it had one set of blades that came straight down from the upper portion of the blade. The teeth came straight down and it was easy to sharpen it. You could get at one side and you can get at the other. But most of the pruning saws you buy now have either 2 or 3 rows of teeth, and it's simply impossible to sharpen them. They'll have a row coming straight down, one going to the right and one going off to the left. Or they'll have 2 rows, a little left, a little to the right. And they cut really, really well with a lot less effort than the old ones, but you can't sharpen them. So when you go out to buy a saw, you want to make sure that you're buying one that has replaceable blades. You can keep, once a saw blade gets dull, if you have replaceable blades, you want to keep that old blade because you can use that for root pruning. Anytime you do root pruning, your blade's going to come in contact with soil and that's going to dull it. So keep your old dull ones for doing root pruning. What about sanitizing? We talked earlier about forest health. We talked about the different kinds of fungal and bacterial and viral diseases that are out there that affect trees. And if you have a tree that you know is diseased, you've got to sanitize your blade after you finish pruning that tree and before you go on to the next one. So maybe you do, you know, you got one tree out there that's diseased, like a dogwood with anthracnose. You might want to do that tree last, and then you come home and do what you have to do for sanitizing. But you can also sanitize in the field. Now, there's some debate about what the best thing is to use for sanitizing, and people talk about Clorox, they talk about alcohol, and then there's a third option for you. So chlorine, the active ingredient in Clorox, works. It kills fungus and it kills virus and it kills bacteria, but it takes a while. You're supposed to totally immerse your blade for about 30 minutes. This is what the research shows. Now, a reason why you don't want to do that, well, first, you can't do it in the field. But secondly, chlorine is not, it doesn't react well. It corrodes steel. So a 30-minute exposure is not good for your tools. So most people are getting away from using Clorox. Alcohol works. It also will damage blades, but you don't have to keep it on long. It's going to do what it has to do in about 10 seconds. It's very fast, but it only works on bacteria. It doesn't kill fungal infections, fungi. So what people are starting to lean towards nowadays is a Lysol product, which has a couple active ingredients in it. One of them kills fungi, and the other, it has alcohol in it that kills bacteria. And you can buy them in these little skinny containers, spray containers, and you can stick it in your pocket. Take a cloth with you, take that with you, and if you know you're working with diseased trees, you can just spray your blade, leave it on for about 10 seconds, and then wipe it off, and then go on to your next tree and not be concerned that you're going to spread the disease. So sanitation is important. And for lubrication, you know, you need to lubricate your tools, your blades. So make sure the closing mechanism is well lubricated, because it'll get gunk in there. And usually we use WD-40 or 3-in-1 oil, but you have an alternative out there that's non-petroleum. This stuff, fluid film, and there are probably other knockoffs of it. And it's lanolin based. It's natural based. It's not a petrochemical. It's, you know, lanolin is extracted from sheep hair, so it doesn't screw up the environment. Anyhow, that's what I use. So I'd spray it on that blade. You can see the blade is dirty, and then I'd go at it with some steel wool, and then I'd wipe it off, and then I'd probably hit it again with just a little bit right here where the action takes place, and let it soak in. Flick the handle a few times to make sure it's getting into the inside, and you're all lubricated and cleaned and ready to go. Okay, so power tools. Generally, we're working with small trees, small branches, so we don't need something like a chainsaw, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But this tool, this is a reciprocating saw, sometimes called a sawzall. It's an attractive tool, not so much because it has a motor, but because it has a real skinny blade. It's only about an inch thick, and this can get into some really tight spots, which can sometimes be hard with your normal straight or folding saw blade, which is usually about 1.5 inches or more. So it's a useful tool to be carrying with you. I always have one with me. When we go out with a group, and you know, somebody will yell, "Hey, I need the sawzall," and we'll get it over to them and they'll do their thing. And if you are doing any bigger branches, a chainsaw is certainly going to save you a lot of effort. This is a battery operated one. Battery operated chainsaws are kind of becoming the thing for people like us, most of whom don't do much chainsaw work. But when you do need one, these battery operated ones are just great, because they're quiet. You don't have to fuel them up. They don't stink from fuel. You don't have to pull them to start them. You just push a button and bang, they go every time. You don't have to pull them 10 times to get them started. They're just, they're great. So we usually have at least one with us anytime we go out for pruning, so it's available. Plus, we have people who are experienced in using them. If you see a cut that should be made with a chainsaw, you just give a yell, and somebody will come over with one and do the work. Okay, so safety. I told you we'd do this last, so you remember it. Now, this gentleman is obviously a professional. You can tell because he's wearing a helmet. And most people don't choose to wear a helmet. He's wearing one because of liability requirements. placed on him by his the owner of the company. But what he does have that we always want is we always want eye protection, and we always want gloves. I went out just a few days ago and I forgot my gloves. And within 5 minutes, I had cut myself. If I'd had gloves on, I never would have felt it. It never would have gotten through the glove. It was just a glancing blow against my blade, and it just slows you down. So gloves and eye protection at a minimum. Which brings us to this. We always have to have what's wrong with this picture. And as you can see, he's not wearing gloves. You can see the edge of his ear here. He doesn't have anything over his eyes, no eye protection. And I should explain, this is not like, this guy isn't out pruning per se. This is an advertisement for an extendable blade set of loppers. That's all it is. So it's okay for him to be making all sorts of mistakes, like standing under the branch that he's about to take off the tree. Where's that branch going to go when he cuts it? It's going to land on him. So that's not good. Don't stand under the branch that you're cutting. And if we really want to get picky, he has his hook on the inside and the blade on the outside. He's going to damage the branch bark collar. And I don't like his shirt either. Anyway, so much for that. Safety. Wear gloves, eye protection, and I at least wear a hat. You know, you're often cutting above you, so you're going to have sawdust raining down on you, and I don't want to get it in the hair that I don't have. Stand to the side of the branch that you're cutting. Even small branches can injure you when they come down. Think twice about climbing or using a ladder. Be particularly careful if you're pruning big limbs. They don't always act the way you'd expect. They don't always fall straight down. Sometimes they'll kick out sideways. I know I spent an afternoon in the emergency room because one kicked out sideways and hit me right here. And I thought I was going to lose my eye, but I didn't. So if you're working away from home, you might want to bring a little first aid kit with you in case you get a little owie on your finger or something. You know, we're working with sharp blades. So protect yourself. And another thing to be thinking about before you go out is, what are you going to do with all these branches that you take off the tree? What are you going to do with your cuttings? We will often use a tarp. We just lay down a tarp near the base of the tree and we throw all our cuttings onto it and we'll drag them. Sometimes we're in a location where we can bring a pickup truck and have it nearby, and we'll throw the cuttings into the bed of the pickup and haul them off. And we like to take our cuttings and form wildlife habitat, brush piles. So you'll see us as we're out doing pruning projects. We may have a chipper with us. We may have a pickup with us. So we have to figure out how we're going to deal with our cuttings before we go out. So think about that. And now we're just about to wrap up. I just want to remind you of your mantra as you're approaching a tree to prune it. Where's the leader? Where's the competition? What am I going to do about the competition? You want to walk around the tree and view it from all directions, because you may find that what your choice was relative to dealing with a codominant situation when you're looking at it from one perspective is different when you look at it from another part of the tree. You might say, oh, I really should be taking off that one instead of that one. So look at it from around the tree. And again, if you're new to this, a lot of you probably already know perhaps everything I've talked about here today. But for those of you who would be just starting out, if you see a branch that you think needs to be pruned, ask yourself, you know, why? Why am I taking this off? Oh, it's dead. Oh, it's crossing. It's rubbing, whatever. Which cut am I going to use on it? Am I going to do a reduction cut? Can I get away with a reduction cut and leave some on the tree, or do I need to remove it in its entirety? What tool am I going to use? You know, how big is it? What cut am I going to use? Is it big enough for me to be going from a one cut with pruners up to using a saw and doing a 2-cut or even a 3-cut method? And where am I going to make a cut? Is it going to be just outside the branch bark collar? Can I find the branch bark collar? Does it have a branch bark collar? Or is it a reduction cut where there is no branch bark collar and I've got to use the branch bark ridge? So these are the kind of basics that you will internalize after just a little bit of experience out pruning. Our next step is we're going to take you out and do some pruning. We'll take our group of 30 or so people, break it up into groups of three. Each team will have an experienced pruner with them, and we'll go prune some trees. Before we start pruning, we will look at a few trees first as a group and talk about what we would do with a given tree. So we'll give you some practice at it. Okay, so the main thing is have fun. Pruning is a lot of fun. So enjoy yourselves, and thank you for listening.